Welcome to Reading Every X-Men Comic Ever, the series where I read, recap, and rank every X-Men comic ever. This week, with Chuck gone in space and Magneto running the short dimension, the original X-Men are back, and they wish to continue the good Professor's work in X Factor by Bob Layton, Jackson Goyce, and Louise Simonson. This book is so goddamn goofy. Like, what do you mean the original group of X-Men get back together to pretend to be the mutant equivalent of Ghostbusters? Add into that the semi-resurrection of the team's token female, which leads to the super messy relationship melodrama that the X-Men have come to be known for, and you have a book that is as infuriating as it is entertaining. For real though, I really enjoyed this book. It's a blast to read, that a lot I was not expecting, which I'll get into. X Factor starts off with the resurrection of Jean Grey, semi-resurrection. It turns out after the shuttle crash in X-Men 101, the Phoenix that came up from the water wasn't the real Jean, but instead a complete replication of her by the Phoenix Force. The real Jean has been in stasis in a weird casket at the bottom of the Jamaican Bay for the past 3 years. This event also caused Jean's telekinesis to overclock, but at the same time it caused her to lose her telepathy, which kinda makes sense. It wasn't hers to begin with. Angel's the first to see her. Well, first of the team anyways. Reed Richards is the one that opened the casket. Regardless, Warren calls Scott to tell him the news, which is understandable. However, this starts off what I'm dubbing the Scott Summers Century of Humiliation, because not only does he leave without telling his wife that the dead ex that he is still in love with and looks just like her has seemingly risen from the dead, he then can't bring himself to tell Jean that he is married and has a kid for 6.5 issues. And that probably would have gone on longer if Jean hadn't put the pieces together herself. Oh, and Madeline also goes full no contact with Scott after he leaves, fully disconnects the phone lines, and seemingly moves out, which, yeah, smartest thing anyone does in this book. Speaking of smart things people do in this book, the idea that Jean and Angel have for X Factor is not one of them. You see, they would like a way to continue Charles Xavier's idea of helping mutants control their abilities so that they can live a normal life. And that's all fine and good. However, the best way they figure of going about that is to use the anti-mutant sentiment and pretend to be a mutant deterrent agency, then switching to their hero personas to step in and rescue the mutant from trouble. This is a bad idea. It's wild that they ever thought it was a good idea, because not only are the people you're rescuing thinking you're going to show up to kill them, but normal people who are accused of being a mutant also think you're going to show up and kill them. Any mutant you're not after hates you for killing mutants, as does any mutant sympathizer. They don't realize that this may be a bad idea until issue 4, when they have to go to a private school to talk to a kid who everyone else thinks has telepathy, when in reality he just put listening bugs in all the phones. And he is traumatized because he thinks he's going to die. For them, this was probably like a week and a half, but still, that's still too long to think this was ever a good idea. And then even after this, they continue to run with the ruse throughout the remaining issues I read. I guess that's not entirely their fault. They had a lot going on after issue 4, but still, they shouldn't have run with the idea in the first place. Anyways, the first mutant they rescue is a young sailor named Rusty, who has pyrokinetic abilities. He gets arrested for burning a woman when his powers manifest, but in his defense, she was assaulting him first. He runs away from prison, and X Factor pick him up. He isn't super thrilled about being hidden away, even if he is wanted by the government for escaping prison, and attempts to escape again, but this gets him into even more trouble. While the team is dealing and trying to train Rusty, they then have to handle with the fact that Beast got captured by an old colleague of his from back in his Amazing Adventure days, Dr. Carl Maddox. Carl here is trying to develop a mutant cure for his son Arthur, and needs help with the formula and a test subject, and Beast ends up fitting both of those requirements. The team breaks into a tech company and finds Beast, but not until after he's been experimented on, and Carl gives his life so the team can escape with his son. Turns out Carl's experiments kind of worked. It actually reverses the effects of Beast's serum, making him human again. X Factor's next big job is a man named Mike Nowlin. Mike's backstory is pretty sad because he grew up a drug addict and didn't know he was a mutant because the drug subdued his powers. The power to amplify other mutants' abilities. And by the time he learned about his powers, it was too late and he was already being used by an evil mutant alliance. The cruel irony of a drug addict becoming the drug. Mike escapes from his captors and hides out in a motel where X-Factor find him and try to convince him to come with them, but before he can, they are attacked by the Alliance of Evil, a team consisting of 4 D-list or lower mutants: Frenzy, Tower, Stinger, and Time Shadow. They're all led by fucking Apocalypse. Yes, the survival of the fittest ancient Egyptian ruler has at least 2 events named after him: Oscar Isaac Apocalypse. Oh, and did you guys know that his mutant power is the same as Reed Richards and Kamala Khan? Because I sure didn't. That was a surprise. Regardless, X-Factor lose the motel fight because Mike powers up the bad guys after seeing they have his ex-wife. However, by sheer coincidence, they're also then able to find the Alliance's hideout and do battle once more. X-Factor wins this time, but Mike and his ex-wife both die, and Apocalypse fucks off. The team also can't do anything about the villains they have captured, considering they're all adults who can control their powers, and taking them prisoner would reveal their ruse, so they have to let them go. When the X-Factor return home, they get into even more trouble when they have to defend themselves from a pair of radioactive mutants that are attacking without revealing their identities to the angry mob that's outside their base, protesting death of mutants. And they somehow come up with and execute a good plan to do that. This plan, however, has unforeseen consequences, because it puts Rusty back in the crosshairs of the US government. Because remember, he's wanted for escaping prison. So the US government sends the Brotherhood, the Freedom Force, to come collect. Rusty tries to escape thanks to a Morlock girl named Skids, but that doesn't really work. This brings us to the final book of the video, X-Factor Annual Number 1 by Bob Layton. This technically goes between issues 7 and 8 of the main book, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the plots that happen in either of those issues. It has X-Factor go to Russia under the guise of sharing information of their operation, but their real plan is to dismantle a mutant prison and rescue the prisoners from a scientist by the name of Wolfgang Helmut Heinrich. Wolfgang turns out to be the first artificial mutant and has the ability to shapeshift into anyone he touches, as well as copy their powers. So he impersonates Bobby to learn of X-Factor's plan, but the real Bobby befriends a rebellious mutant cell in Russia that help the team complete their mission. This book ends on a cliffhanger that the Doctor survived and is secretly on the same flight as the team back to America. This character is never used again. This is his one and only appearance. I guess Mystique corners the market on shapeshifters in X-Men books. And that is all of X-Factor that I read this week. This book is a blast. I highly recommend going and reading it yourself. I personally love having this cast back together, especially now that they're in a book that isn't putting me to sleep half the time. I'm looking at you, Silver Age. The relationships are messy and a little infuriating at times, but I think that's what makes them so entertaining to read. I fully covered the mess that Scott's gotten himself into, but I haven't mentioned that Warren is also still in love with Jean, despite having a girlfriend of his own, and Beast's old flame Vera has changed with the times, and he isn't adjusting to it well. Speaking of Vera, she was one of the many surprises in this book. I did not expect her to return at all. Much like the return of Human Beast or Apocalypse showing up in issue 5. I hope this book continues to have surprises like that throughout its run. Moving on to rankings, X-Factor gets 7 and 8s abound for all 9 issues I read this week. And that's a very strong start. I think it's the strongest start for an X-Men ongoing aside from New Mutants, which got primarily 8s. With just the 8 issues in the main series, it's already brushing up against Uncanny X-Men in terms of average score. So if it keeps up this quality throughout its run, we should be in for an all-timer. That's all for this week. If you've gotten all the way through, I really appreciate it. Please leave a like or a comment below. That really helps out. The entire playlist is in the description below. And subscribe to stay tuned for the next one, in which we finally return 2 New Mutants to see the ramifications of their deaths and resurrections from Secret Wars 2. See you then.